Hey there, church. It is a wonderfully snowy day. And today, as I take kind of a midday break from my indoor work to make this video, and I really like to have my midday prayer outside as much as I can. I'm reminded of some words of Thomas Merton, the American Trappist monk who lived as a hermit for the last few years of his life. And as he was doing that, he wrote a recommendation to people that may be easier for some than for others. But he said, as much as possible, do your work outside. If you need to pray, pray outside. If you need to write, write outside. And I think what he was getting at is that the world is just so big and grand, and sometimes it can feel a little bit inhospitable, as in a blizzard blowing through here at the end of December. But this world that we live in is God's world, and God has a whole way of being, enlivening the world and reaching out with blessing to every single person in it. And we can get kind of trapped and cramped in our ways of thinking and in our ways of life. This is some of what we're asking about in our current worship series, Another Kind of Life. And in this week's text, the Beatitudes will ask about how Jesus leads us into another kind of blessing. This Lent, we're going to gather again for an all-church study that's the first in a series just freshly released called Practicing the Way. The very first Christians were called the Way, people who were following in the way of Jesus, who sought to live as he did. And so Practicing the Way is a series of videos that introduce us to classic Christian spiritual practices, and really they're practices shared by other religions as well. The first one, Sabbath, has its origins, of course, in Judaism. And for this Lent, we're going to gather and ask, what does it mean to live in a way of life that's shaped by certain practices, where the point isn't just to do the practice, but to do the practice in such a way that we live open to the kind of life that God would form in us in all parts of life. So we're going to ask about the Sabbath, which was a practice that Jesus observed and that Jews have been observing for thousands and thousands of years, and is right at the heart of Jewish faith. But it's at the heart of Christian faith too. And so this practice that's about stopping and resting and delighting in worship, we're going to explore it in after worship groups, and it will also be the topic of our Lenten worship. We'll have some shortened worship services and then gather upstairs in Fellowship Hall and downstairs in the gathering room to learn about the gift of Sabbath and how this practice in our own lives could enrich and deepen our knowledge of God and our following of Jesus, and just our sense of the blessedness, the goodness of life. But we're not just going to talk about it, we're also going to be sent back into our lives to ask, what does it mean for us to practice Sabbath today? This is part of the way we continue to love God, share relationships, and serve others from the heart of Christ. Part of loving God is saying, God, how can I open my life to such a way, to you in such a way that your life in me continues to grow and to deepen? We continue to grow and deepen in our life of service, and one of the ways this will happen is in our Super Bowl lunch, where we'll enjoy soup. We'll put together some soup kits that will go out through the food pantry, and we will also take up a free will offering for those who want to contribute to the ministry of North Church, which is a congregation in the city of Cleveland that's comprised mostly of homeless or formerly homeless people. This Sunday, we're also going to gather for our annual meeting, in which we'll look back across 2022 and ask, how was it that God led us to love God and share relationships and serve others from the heart of Christ? And how is it that, especially as we engage our journey of promise, God is empowering us and leading us to a more expansive, maybe even a more daring way of living our vision as the church in the world today. So, church, I pray that you will receive some kind of blessing by your openness to God today, and you might follow Thomas Merton's advice: is to step outside, breathe outside air in this wonderful world that God has created, and ask, how is God leading me to a deeper, a bigger, a more expansive life in the way of Jesus?